Hello, and welcome to Stumbling Forward, a podcast about real people and the failures, spiritual awakenings, life changes, and lessons learned that shape them into who they are today. Hello, and thank you for joining another episode of Stumbling Forward. I am Erica Taylor Beck, and today I have the opportunity to interview Sherri Parks. Sherri, thank you very much for joining today. Would you like
Thank
to tell us
you.
about yourself?
Yeah, thanks so much, Erica. I'm your typical American. Spent 30 years in the corporate world, raising four children, two of them stepkids, blending families, and just having a normal life. In 2022, I just found myself not living with vitality, feeling joyless and feeling like I wasn't really sure what I was doing. And so I made a pretty big decision to step out of corporate America at the peak of my career and took a year off. And I'd had a book kind of knocking on me for 15 years. I started writing that book, and then just very recently I opened up my own coaching business, really to give back to people. That was really what came through the year off and my intuition. I'm reinventing myself, becoming an entrepreneur like you. So delighted to be here.
Thank you. I'm glad to have you here. We chatted when we first synced up to talk about this, and we had a lot of similarities in our stories and our approaches to things, which I thought was really fascinating. And you have, I think, done levels above what I'm trying to do at this point. So I'm really excited to hear from you and learn from you. I agree that you said that 2022 hitting that period of no vitality, and there has to be something more than this. Is that the feeling that you had of this? This is it. This can't be it.
Yeah, I mean, just things that I had a great career, I had a great life, but things that used to excite me didn't excite me anymore, and I literally found myself in meetings like, and I would go home, I would plop myself on the couch, and I felt like I had no energy. I would cry and just say to my husband, I feel like my life is joyless for all that we have. I feel like there's no joy. And in some ways, I felt like a prostitute, prostituting my wellness for money. And I'm like, there's got to be more. I'm still young, like there's got to be more. And it was showing up in my body too, like I couldn't lift my arm, which now I know is very much like something that women deal with, this frozen shoulder deal. And I couldn't lift my arm like that. So I knew if I continue to go like this and force myself into this square peg round hole, I'm gonna get sick. And I didn't want to do that, and I just knew there was more. Um, I talked with my husband and I said, I want to leave my company. I want to take 3 months off and kind of be a lamp unto thyself, which Buddha says, and just get to the bottom of why I feel like this. I didn't know. I was really confused. Like I had everything to the outside world that society says is success. I had it, but I wasn't happy. I didn't feel successful. I felt sad and joyless. So I started out with 3 months and quickly figured out that my inner clipboard lady, that is that executive woman, goals and dreams and all that stuff, it wasn't going to be on that timetable. It was going to go beyond that. So I took a full year off and just really tried to listen to my body, my inner soul, my inner voice, those inner whispers that sometimes we don't slow down enough to even hear. I spent a lot of time just trying to be patient with that. And healing. I had pushed myself beyond the brink. That's why my shoulder was like that. I wasn't sick. My biometrics were all within normal range, but I would say they were getting up towards the high end of the range, and the inflammation in my body, that was high. So I really worked on getting back to the gym, working out. I had gotten away from that, eating right, and spent a lot of time just doing nothing, which was very hard for me because I'm not a do nothing type of person,
But it's
you
really
know.
healing when you allow yourself, and it sounds sad to say when you allow yourself to rest, but when you are somebody who is go, go, go and get things done all the time, resting feels like a waste of time almost, which is terrible. What I really love about what you did was that you talked to your husband and you recognized, like, I'm not happy.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take some time off to figure out why I'm not happy. And you didn't just assume I'm depressed. I'm going to get some medication and keep plugging forward. I love that there was something in you that said, this is not normal. This is not okay. By all accounts, should be happy, but I'm
Yeah.
not. So let me look deeper. That's great because most people, I don't think, would know to look that far inward. It's just, well, why am I not happy? What's wrong with me? Let me fix it versus doing the deep work and the shadow work to get to the core of why is this not fulfilling for me? Do you know where that came from? How you knew to just invest in you versus pushing forward and telling yourself to suck it up, take some meds?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I think on and off I have struggled with depression. Like early on in my life, like it would take me down. I would have to take a day off of work just to kind of refuel because I'm also an introvert and I'd put myself way out there and then I'd have to contract. Way back then, there was something in me that knew that there wasn't a chemical imbalance that needed medication. And I think some people do deal with that and medicine works for them. But there was something inside me that knew this wasn't a chemical imbalance. This was an alignment issue. And I knew that early on, even in my 20s. Oftentimes, medical people would say, hey, why don't you just take a little something to take the edge off? And I never did. I just chose never to do that. I just chose to continue to ask questions and say, what's not aligned? Who am I? What is this about? And I think it was one of the earliest moments where I really listened to my intuition. My intuition always said, meds for some reason aren't for you, Sherri. And I think it comes from my higher self, not from, and just reading. Now, I read a lot about health and wellness along the way.
I love
Yeah.
that.
So it started really in my teens because I had quite a crisis period in my 20s.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I really struggled in my early 20s. As I think a lot of young people coming out of college, your life is 100% scripted. You
right.
know,
Now you have to
get
figure it
good
out.
grades, do sports, do a club, and you're in the top 10%. And then the minute you get out of college, it's like, wait a second, what's the path? And there is no path. So you
Mhm.
have to really start to figure it out. And that was a crisis point for me.
Surprise, surprise, Sherry. That also resonates a lot with me. But yeah, my early 20s, I graduated and I had also had a sexual assault that happened at that point too. And I spiraled out of control and started getting on antidepressants because I couldn't quite figure out how to cope with all of that, starting my life and moving on as an adult and healing. I needed to get on something for a while. But I do think a lot of that has healed because I also don't feel like I was in alignment with myself for a really long time. I don't think I really was in alignment with myself, maybe until the last handful of years. And it took feeling that discomfort, even when things around you are great, and you look around and I should be happy. I have all these things that people would love to have, and I'm not happy. And it's because it's not for you. You're in somebody else's ideas and ideals. And if you find what is actually aligned for you, that's when you start to feel at peace. I feel like I was living a life I think that other people wanted for me or that they thought that I should have and that they would want. And so I was doing what I thought I was supposed to do, but it wasn't necessarily what I needed or wanted. Maybe it was needed. I think I did need it at the time. It's a good learning
Mhm.
lesson and I'm grateful for it, but it wasn't what I was supposed to do long term. And so that definitely has shifted a little bit.
When you look in nature, like nature gives us a lot of clues. If you look at a tree doesn't struggle to exist. A
No,
tree is just kind of like reaching for the sun. A flower doesn't struggle to exist. And yet, 7 out of 10 adults in our country are on at least one prescription drug. That's
right.
not natural. It's sort of like this society that has become very imbalanced. And we have a society that is very geared towards what I call linear energies, executive thinking, budgeting, rational thought, data. Corporate worlds are governed by facts, data, logic. And all of that is really good. I don't want to discount any of that. That kind
Right.
of thinking leads to putting astronauts on Mars and lots of really good stuff. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't account for intuition, cooperation, the mystery of life, joy. Like, showing up and singing around a fire and the joy that that brings to some of us. Linear thinking doesn't account for that. And we live in a society that is way overbalanced with linear. So
Mhm.
I'd love to see not a discount of linear because it's very valuable, but a bringing up of like holistic energies that balance that out. And I think a lot of us would start to feel better in today's society. There's so many people every day I talk to that are just generally struggling. Genuinely, like, I don't know where I fit. Am I happy? I'm just like getting up, making the donuts. What am I doing? So I can go on vacation and feel better.
I love that whole concept, and I do think the holistic side needs to happen because I was talking about escapes and distractions versus things that really recharge you. So if you're working to get away from your day-to-day life, you're not living a life that you love. If you say, okay, I can't wait until this month because that's when we go on vacation and I can get away from all of this. But then you come back and you're even more burned out because you have to get caught up from all of the stuff while you were out and the high that you have of being somewhere different and then the drop that you have coming back to the life that isn't really what you want, that except the imbalance is huge. And we do focus a lot on these things. And I myself definitely focused on those skills and the linear thinking. And it wasn't until I started thinking more holistically, which also makes you sound crazy. I want to say that if you are somebody who is in an environment where linear is the norm, when you start talking about holistic, anything, spirituality, anything, you're suddenly this crazy person that has lost the plot. And it's not the case at all. You need that balance because I think we're seeing it in so many environments where this one way of thinking and doing, we're burning people out. They're not
Yeah.
recharged, they're not fulfilled, and they're just clocking in, getting the paycheck, doing what they have to do, but they're not bringing themselves to work because they're not aligned with it. So they save themselves for after work and what they're passionate about, but that's a tiny fraction of their day. So there's this huge imbalance. And I would love to see us doing things differently and being more open to the different viewpoints without discounting one as less than.
Yeah, 100%. I do think it's getting better. Like,
Yes.
I think people are starting to talk about it, and the more you and I and other people talk about it, we start to normalize it. Even today, like I was working out this morning and I was watching the show Special Forces, which is that reality show where people put themselves through I guess like a boot camp to get into the special forces. Anyway, it's fascinating. This big, burly, like really tough guy, he was talking about vulnerability and how vulnerability is a strength. And that really warmed my heart because I think you have to normalize that. Talking about spirituality, talking about living with mystery and the unknown, all of these holistic kind of energies. It's not woo woo. It's half of nature, and we're just a lot of us cut a lot of that off because we thought, oh, to be successful in the world, I've got to nurture these linear energies because that's what people value the most. And as leaders, we've got to recognize that both have a lot of value. And I think the companies of the future that are going to be the most successful are going to be the most balanced.
Oh,
And the data is there. The companies that have more women or more people that have holistic energies as well as linear, they are more successful because they come across more empathetic. They come across more human. They resonate with people and people's problems. So there's a practicality of it as well.
and I agree with that. I have a leadership coaching business, and when I talk about it, the people that tend to dismiss it because it sounds like soft skills, and soft skills almost is demeaning because I think they're actually more important than the hard skills because you can learn how to do something technical. I can teach you that, but I can't teach you how to care about somebody or how to show those types of emotions. And that's what, like you said, really push those businesses apart from the other ones. And that's what people and customers want to see. I think, especially after COVID, where we were all remote and you couldn't go face to face anymore. And so they really wanted to see more human interaction versus just AI. As we develop more and more amazing technology, we're losing a little bit of that human element and we're reducing people to data points. And I think we're doing a disservice to folks. But one question I wanted to ask you, you mentioned the gentleman, big burly man talking about vulnerability. Do you feel like the messenger makes a difference? So if you and I were to talk about vulnerability, do you think people are like just some women talking about feelings? But if you see this burly man saying vulnerability is a strength, do you feel like that has a different weight to it because of the right person, I hate to say it like that, but the right person talking about it to get it across to people who maybe wouldn't hear it the same coming from you or from me?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point. I think it's always important for people like us that are trying to change the norms, we're trying to make a difference, to always consider who's listening. So if we're trying to make a point to super linear thinkers in the C-suite, the way we would make an argument is different than the way we might talk, the way we're doing right now. And so I think you and I have the ability to be equally as influential as the big burly guy if we are considering who's listening and how they're listening to us. And we're adjusting. That's part of being a holistic leader is the ability to be empathetic, the ability to view the world through the other person's eyes. And if you do that, there's much more of a chance to be influential and acknowledge that there's a lot of value in linear thinking. We're not talking about taking that down. We're just talking about the other stuff got lost. Let's bring that back a little bit so it's more balanced. And I think people will hear that differently depending on how it's relayed.
That makes a lot of sense. And I agree with that a lot because sometimes when people see men talk about it, it is a little bit different because you're not usually expecting men to talk about those things. And so sometimes when men see other men talking about it, they feel a little bit more like, oh, okay, if he's doing it, I can do it. But you're right. We still have the ability. And I think people who have really strong emotional intelligence can navigate those conversations really well because you know, okay, the person I'm talking to doesn't really have high emotional intelligence, so I need to be able to appeal to their logic. And that's when you start using the data points a little bit more versus your team will feel valued. You're like, I don't really care about how they feel. I just, how much money will I make? But when you know
Right.
how to navigate those conversations, it does make a lot of sense. So you mentioned, you took some time to really evaluate. How did you decide to go into coaching? At what point were you like, this is what I want to do now?
So I thought a lot about, well, I actually really tried to get out of my head because my head is synonymous with my ego, and my ego was like, Sherri, at your peak earning years, get yourself back into corporate America. What are you doing? That was the message that was working against me that entire year. So I did a lot of getting on the yoga mat. I did a lot of meditation and tried to really listen to that small inner voice. And definitely the inner voice was like, you gotta write. You have to write. That was an inner voice that was coming through me for 15 years. Even to the point where my husband bought me books on how to write, and they just sat on the shelf. So I took those out and started doing that. And then I started to think about and tap into my intuition around when in my career or my life did I lose track of time. And I had worked with a friend of mine. We built this program at my company called the Authenticity Program. 350 women went through it. We had several different cohorts. And Erica, I loved that work. Like, I could do that work all day long, every day. I loved the conversation. Many women got promoted. Some women left. One established her own herbalist company. She'd wanted to do that for years and years and years. So I just saw women really step into their authentic power, and it was so fulfilling. So I thought, gosh, I want to do more of that kind of work. So we're pursuing that with a couple of companies right now. And then I said, what else can I do to augment authorship, speakership, podcasts, authenticity program? Well, I always loved working with people at work, mentoring. I mentored hundreds, maybe thousands across the 30 years, and just helped them develop their lives to be lives that they love to get out of bed to do. I thought, hey, I'm going to do this as well and hang a shingle and see what happens. So far, I'm loving it. The difference my husband sees in me after working with a client is very different than me coming home from a board presentation or haggling over like budgets and all that kind of stuff. I don't miss that. So it came very organically. I literally had to give myself permission to not have the answer and to not know and to just sit in the unknown. And I had to heal. I learned through many years, but it just got crystallized in the last year that I saw a dynamic between my mother and father. I had wonderful parents, but my mother was, a stay at home mom. I think if she were a mom today, she wouldn't have been. I think she desperately wanted to be a mom and have a family, and she desperately wanted to be a mathematician. And
Wow.
in the era of being a mom, that wasn't something that was done. It was like an either or proposition. So she was faced with this impossible decision and really took on the mom role and did a great job. And my dad went to work, and my dad was a great dad as a provider, but didn't emote a lot. And so that dynamic, I don't know, as a young girl I picked up on the energies or something where I knew my mom didn't have her full power, and I was like, I don't want to be like that. So I very much became a father's daughter, which was somebody trying to get their father's approval and chased achievement as a way to fill that hole. And so I had to come face to face with the fact that I had done that in my life and choose where that was authentic versus trying to fill an unworthiness hole that got created when I was a small child and created trauma in me. So I really like the intuition around coaching and writing and all that stuff didn't come until I went through the dark of that and really had to grieve who I thought I was. Like, I really thought I was this executive woman, and that's not actually who I am. I spent 30 years chasing that. So that was not fun to recognize, and I had to go through a pretty deep grieving process through it. And then once I did that and stopped resisting, then kind of the intuition came for my next steps. But I had committed to myself that I wouldn't take steps from here. It would all be from here.
That's incredible. It's hard to shift if you don't know
It's hard.
how, because most of us, I think, do come from our heads. And I was talking to someone about that today as well, that I've lived so much in my head, I intellectualize a lot of emotions. And I thought I was feeling them, but I was just thinking through them for the longest time. And if you don't actually feel them, they keep popping up because you need to feel and heal. And so I dealt with that already. Why is it still popping up? Because I didn't actually feel it and process it and let it go. I was thinking through it and wanting to earn approval, wanting to earn respect. And I didn't really want it once I had it. I liked parts of it, but like you,
Yeah.
and that's why I feel like you and I had a lot in common. Parts I loved and missed the most about my job once I left corporate was coaching and developing people. I loved helping people develop into their next levels, especially new managers. And but I did not miss the meetings. I didn't miss the projects and the tasks, and I love solving problems, but I didn't miss all of the day to day that was pulling me away from being a good people manager. Honestly, when I took a break, I thought I would work with animals, and I volunteered with animals for a while because we are big animal people here. But even that, this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. Like
Yeah.
volunteering, yes, but this is not where I'm supposed to go with my career, my next steps. And I thought about what really lit me up, and it was helping and developing people. And so I kind of stumbled into coaching as well. But you do have to do that shadow work. And like you mentioned, it's not comfortable. It's hard to look at yourself and to see where you have gaps and where you are making mistakes and living your life for other people or doing things that aren't really aligned with who you are. It's hard to recognize that, first of all, but when you do recognize it, it's hard to undo it and
Yeah.
relearn what you want to learn because you are almost conditioned in a way to do a certain thing. And so when you say, okay, I don't want to do that anymore, that's not really who I am. So you almost are starting over, multiple
Yeah.
times you start over. Whenever you have to heal something, it's a new beginning in a sense.
Yeah, and you have to grieve something too.
Yes.
And for me, I don't know if this was true for you, but I couldn't have done it by myself because I don't feel like I was living for other people's expectations. I was definitely living for my expectations, but it was my ego's expectations. So, we are born as these little babies, these little hearts. We're pure. We ask for what we need, and then it's like something happens. We get left in the crib a little too long. We raise our hands in grade school and we get, embarrassed, and It's almost like these life happenings happen and then a barbed wire gets created around us. And we create adaptive selves or false selves, which is our ego. And it's like the ego runs the day. And for me, I have this inner ego. I call her the clipboard lady because she's got a lot of skills. She's very efficient. She's very organized. She's very driven. Like if you want something done, clipboard lady's getting it done. But that was a protective, adaptive persona that I created that then drove the day. So I needed help. So I had multiple coaches through the year where I trusted them and we created a great relationship, and because I needed them to say like, wait a second, is that clipboard lady talking or is that really like true Sherri talking? And in some places I couldn't discern the difference. So I needed help. In some cases, clipboard lady was so loud and so mad about what I was doing and so scared that I needed help sitting with her and saying, I know you're scared. I know you're just trying to protect me, but like we've evolved to the place where you can be in the back seat now. And I needed gentle holding of coaches to help me really navigate that too. So I don't know, did you have that experience too?
I did have some people that actually had a spiritual coach at one point, just kind of a mentor to help me learn more about that side of things because I didn't know anything about it, but I really wanted to.
Yeah.
And that was helpful for me to open doors that I didn't realize weren't open. But you almost nailed it. Sometimes, Sherri, I feel like you and I might be the same person and feel like this is like a therapy session. But you're right that you develop this inner persona that protects you. And it's around shame and embarrassment and guilt and whatever other emotions might be tied in that, but you put this persona on to, I was a perfectionist and,
Yep.
and I cared about relationships and wanted to build relationships, but at the same time, I kept most people at an arm's length. Like I would let you in to an extent, and I was vulnerable to an extent, but I didn't really let people in beyond a certain point, and it was a protection thing. And I realized I'm not really being open with anybody. And even when I was married, it took me years. My wife would be like, I don't know what you're thinking. I don't know how you're feeling about things. And I had to really learn how to share my thoughts and my feelings and be open about it because I was so used to processing everything alone. But you are right when you say that this inner self is there to protect you in the best way it knows how, but it's almost like a computer where it can only analyze and process things that have already happened. It can't really take you forward unless it's repeating cycles and loops that have already happened. And so if you're trying to grow out of what you have already been doing, you have to let go of that persona and then be Sherri or be Erica, and you can't be clipboard lady or whoever my inner, didn't give her a name yet, but I need to. But whoever that is, you have to kind
Yeah.
of mute that to move forward. And so yeah,
Yeah.
you're right.
Yeah, and thank them. Because like inner clipboard
Yes.
lady for me, I'm absolutely convinced that I would have spiraled out of control in life.
Yeah.
I would have been probably a heroin addict in a psych ward or something like that. So the inner disciplinarian kept me from going there. And so it took me a while in life to be able to be like, I actually don't need her anymore. So I had some profound sessions with a spiritual mentor where I just thanked her and said, thank you for the role that you've played in my life, because it's always trying to do good, but it is adaptive to trauma. And, like you and I think we always tried to strive for excellence. Well, in so many ways, that's a trauma response. Like nobody checked on me because I always got all A's and I was a good kid. But I was so striving for perfectionism that I was, killing myself.
Yeah, it's true. There's a lot of signs that we probably could notice earlier on in childhood or adolescence that we don't notice. And I don't have children, so I can't speak to it myself, but just now knowing more about childhood trauma and how we adapt, you can start to see the signs in, I think, younger people. And now that people are waking up and knowing better, hopefully we start
Yeah.
doing better and preventing them from getting to their 30s, 40s, 50s, where they're just starting to realize and having to go back and redo and heal those things that maybe we can catch it earlier. One thing, you mentioned about thanking the clipboard lady and those trauma responses. When I was in my 20s and spiraling, I didn't really have anything that was holding me together at that point, I actually really let go. I was in a really bad place. I was drinking heavily. I was self-injuring. There was a lot of really bad coping habits. And that was, it's really sad to say, but that was the freest I have ever been. And there was a part of me that missed that period, not for what it was because it was terrible and it was really damaging, but I didn't care what other people thought. And I
Mm-hmm.
just was myself. And in that moment, I was really upset and spiraling and sad, but I was being authentic. Like that was the most authentic I ever was. And there was a part of me after I had healed and had gotten better that kind of missed that freedom of just being, this is what it is, like it's all out there for you to see, judge it as much as you want, but like, I don't have the energy to pretend to not be this. That's something I've thought about that I don't share often because there might be some judgment there. And I don't miss being in that place, but I miss the freedom I felt when I really was just too exhausted to care about my appearance and how people perceived me. And there was so much freedom that came with that, but it just came at such
Yeah.
a bad time. And I wish I could have felt it in a place when I was in a happier and healthier place. But that's something to think back on that I've thought about before, but never really openly shared. I don't know. This is a random thought.
Well, I think that's so human because as we grow up, particularly coming out of college, I think we then try on different personas, like different ways of being. And it makes sense that, hey, there was a part of that person that you were that really worked for you. The other part didn't work for you. And so you got yourself out of that, but you dropped all of it. Now
Mhm.
the trick is the part that did work for you, how do you bring that back? And we have agency to do that. Just sometimes we don't slow down enough to practice and bring that forward and sometimes seek help because it's almost impossible to do in here
Right.
because you need outside help. We get muddled.
Yes. You mentioned about getting in touch with your intuition and hearing it. Like we don't slow down enough to hear it. Do you have any advice or guidance for folks on how to listen to it and maybe how to identify and recognize it? Because you might be hearing it, but you think it's just you. And so how do you know how to decipher the intuition pieces?
Yeah. It can be tricky for sure. I'm not an expert in this, but I'll just share my experience. I think anytime you want to listen to your intuition, you got to get out of your head. And there's several ways you can get out of your head. For me, it's all about the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve is a nerve that runs from the back of your head down your spine. And it is the nerve that regulates your nervous system, whether you're in flight or fright or whether you're actually relaxed. It's almost virtually impossible to hear your intuition if you are in a high cortisol flight, freeze, fight mode. And so the trick is to find out what relaxes you. So for me, it's yoga. I found a yoga instructor that really taught me what yoga is. I find that sometimes yoga instructors are stretch instructors, which is very good physical therapy, but really yoga is about the mind. And so I do all kinds of yoga, yoga nidra, yin yoga, sound baths. And when I can calm my nervous system, then there's like this little voice that pops up. And it's almost like there's a knowing. Have you ever walked into a place or met somebody and you're like, that's my person. Like, I just know it. I can't tell you. I'm not going to be able to write a 47-page white paper on why, but I just have this knowing. That is your inner voice. It never comes when you're in a high stress state, though.
That's a
So,
good point.
first step one is get into a relaxed state and then hear the voice. And then it's this, like, yeah, this is true. And it stays with you. Like sometimes, I've tested this idea of coaching and book writing and is this really me? That's a big part of I just got back from Peru for a silent retreat. A big part of what I was doing is trying to listen to my intuition and affirm like, is this the right thing or am I just going after some false thing again? Because I really want to be intentional about it. It takes practice. It takes
Yes.
practice. Yeah.
Yes, for sure. It is hard to turn your mind off. When you were at the silent retreat, how did that go? Did you feel like, yes, this is aligned and this is what I should be doing?
Yeah, I
Good.
get a lot of affirmation of, yeah, you're on the right track. And as you know, Erica, like the great thing about corporate America is you get a job and somebody pays your salary.
Yes.
and you get benefits, and all of a sudden we're on our own. It creates a lot of self-doubt. It's all on you to generate clients and all that stuff. So yeah, self-doubt had been creeping in. Clipboard lady had been much louder because I'm doing well, but things aren't going at the pace that I really want them to. I was working on growing my ability just to trust. Take action, don't be attached to the outcome, do the right thing. Things will fall into place, and I very much believe that. So I was practicing living in that space.
That's beautiful. I'm glad that you got to do that. And it's
Yeah, it was great.
hard. It is so hard, especially coming from a corporate background and being a high achiever to learn how to trust and surrender. It sounds crazy to people who aren't in it that you quit your job and you're like, I just trust that things will work out. And they're like, the universe isn't going to pay your bills, but yes, it will. Things will happen. I will
Right.
be taken care of. And yes, I will have to do some actions, but they're aligned actions that will get me where I need to go. And so things will work out if I stay on the right path. And I believe that too. But it's
Yeah.
hard. I don't know if your husband has doubts, but sometimes my wife, who is not necessarily on the same part of the path that I am on right now. She's very supportive, but we're not on the same stages. And so, she's been great about me not having an official job. But there are obviously, future concerns, especially with the economy and things that are happening currently. And to say, I trust that the universe is going to take care of us. And it's like, I'm glad one of us trusts it because she's a little bit nervous. And so
Yeah.
having to deal with trusting and surrendering and believing in all of it, that things will happen. And I love what you said about don't get attached to the outcome. Do it if you really feel like it's what you're supposed to be doing. Do it for the love of it and the passion of it. And
Yeah.
that's what really has been keeping me going because I really love what I'm doing. And I love even these
Yeah.
podcasts where I get to talk to really incredible people and learn about their lives and their experiences. And it's it's all getting in the right direction. Like I'm going where I need to go. Am I there right
Yeah.
now? Not yet, but I'm going
Yeah.
to be. I believe that. And I believe that you are too.
Yeah. 100%. And, this is where I just believe in balance. So, yes, Tony Robbins talks about this. All the major spiritual coaches, leaders, they talk about managing your state, your mindset, and that's what we're talking about. That doesn't mean you abandon practicality. Like, my husband's very supportive, but we have boundaries, and it's kind of like, hey, we have certain other things we want to do that take resources, and we'll figure it out. But hey, I don't think life's worth living if you're not going to go for it. And I just believe that if I'm 100% in alignment and true, it totally will work out. Well, I'm growing in that.
It,
I made a lot of progress in
well,
Peru.
good, good. And that gives me hope. Since I'm not going to Peru, I will just go through
Yeah.
you, and I feel better about that now too. But it does. It's hard to shift your whole mindset.
Yeah.
What before it was you put in more work, you do more whatever to get what you need. And now sometimes it's you take a pause and you just wait a little bit and you let things happen. And that's hard to do when you equate success with doing more. It's hard to, like you talked about earlier, about resting and allowing yourself to rest, to not burn yourself out trying to make something happen. Like it will happen. Divine timing. I have a hard time with divine timing. I get it, I understand it, but I am very patient with everything around me except for myself. And I'm going to do this. I'm like, why am I not done yet? Breathe. Just let it happen when it happens. You're learning and you're growing along the way.
It's the same with childbirth, right? Like women's bodies were made to bring a human being from the spiritual world into the physical world. That's just amazing. But when a woman resists that, it becomes 10 times harder. It's the same thing with anything we're trying to create. If we resist it, we make it 10 times harder. If we just soften, trust, and believe, we allow for the thing to come through us, which is so hard in our society because it goes against what most people believe. It's very much a practice. So I'm growing in it and I'm practicing every day.
I love that.
So
I love
yeah.
that. I do want to be mindful of time, so I'll make sure we
Yeah.
get ready to
Oh
wrap.
my goodness.
Yeah, I've loved
Can I
chatting
just
with
say
you.
one more thing? The other
Please.
thing is, this is how our first conversation went. It went by like that. I think redefining success is important. Like the fact that I can move my arm, I can sleep on my stomach again. I wasn't able to do that because of my arm. My relationship with my kids is better. I have
Yes.
more friends. My body's better. I don't miss the meetings and the budgets, and I don't miss any of it. So what can each one of us do to say, how do we define success? Money is one element, but
Hmm.
what are the other elements? I think that's really important.
It is very important. And we talked about this on the podcast a couple episodes ago about redefining as we grow and as we get older and adapt. But yeah, for me, it's about being able to not have to set my alarm. So if I want to go hiking midday, I get to go hiking. I get to make my schedule. I get to be with my dogs all day. I get to work with people that I really love working with, and I end up feeling more refreshed and recharged, and I am a lot happier. And my wife is happier with me because she's like, "You're a lot happier. I like you better." It just works out. Things work out. I agree with you. So, if people want to work with you or are interested in learning more about you and you have a book that's in the works, it's not ready to go yet, but do you want to talk about your book a little bit and share a little more about what you're working on?
Yeah, yeah, thank you so much for asking. So, I'm writing my memoir. It is in three parts. Part one is basically how, that little heart that babies are born with, and then the barbed wire, what happened to me. It describes how I got separated from myself and how I created this inner clipboard lady. And I have other personas too inside me, but how that all happened. So that's part one, which is a very human thing. I think that happens to all of us, whether people are aware of it or not. It took me a while to be aware of it, but it's in everybody. It's, if you read Eckhart Tolle's book and the ego, talks all about this. Part two is what I call following the breadcrumbs. So when did I start to wake up? And when were there little cracks in the armor? And what did I do to unravel that? And there's a number of different modalities that I did, education things, indigenous cultures, things like that. So I describe that in the book, and it's really an unpeeling of my ego to my authentic self. And then part three is, what is my life like now? And what am I doing now? So it's very personal. I love it. I love writing. I didn't think I would like writing, but I'm really enjoying it. So my hope is that it'll be published later this year. I am trying to pitch it to a couple of traditional publishing companies, so if that happens, it'll probably be 2026. So we'll see what happens. If anybody wants to work with me, I can be found at sherriparks.com, and you can read a little bit more about me. And I have a calendar there. I offer 30-minute free discovery calls to just share what people want to work on and what it might be like to work with me. No obligation, no hard sales, like, hey, it needs to fit, and I'd be delighted to talk with anybody.
Thank you very much. And I'll make sure to put all of that info in the show notes as well. And honestly, anybody who wants to work with Sherri, I feel like would benefit because I have sincerely enjoyed my chats with you. They have flown by, but I just feel like talking to an old friend. So anyone who wants to work with you, I feel like will be better for it. So
Same, right back at you,
thank you.
Erica.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Is there anything else, just last open call for anything else that you want to share that you want to make sure that gets out into the world today, that people hear from you before we wrap?
I guess my main message is, if there's something going on with you that doesn't fit, don't be afraid to pursue the question. And as Dr. Gabor Mate would say, have curious compassion with yourself. What's going on? Be a lamp into yourself and say, what is this all about? Because through that discomfort on the other side is magic. I promise you, your life gets better. It really, really does. So,
Yes.
and reach out to Erica or me if you want some help in that journey. Because we're here. That's what we're here to do.
Yes, yes, actually, that's part of my purpose is to help others get through things I've already gone through. So happy to
So,
help. But it does get better. It seems really scary. It seems very
yeah.
tumultuous at first, but it is so much lighter on the other side. It gets better, and everything that you start to do is more aligned with who you are, your friendships, your relationships, the things that you're doing. It does get so much better. It's just
And
hard to see.
you don't have to do what we did. Like, you and I did something fairly traumatic, like
Quitting our
leaving
jobs
our
and
corporate. Yeah, you don't have to do that. There's ways to make your life better without doing something that dramatic, because
yeah.
not everybody can do that. You know, The reality is that not a lot of people can do that, and there's a lot of other things you can do.
Yes. Yeah, you can just dip your toe and you don't have to dive the whole way in up front.
Yeah.
So yes, if there's something, if you have questions, reach out to either of us or post any comments on underneath the show links. And thanks for listening. Thank you, Sherri, so much for
Thank
your time today and for
you.
joining. It was lovely to hear from you, hear
You
about
too.
your journey. And all right, folks, thank you
Thanks
for
so
listening to
much.
Stumbling Forward. We'll catch you on the next one.